Hopes for an imminent ceasefire in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas were dashed yesterday as the militant group rejected a proposal put forward by President Biden. The proposal aimed to secure a pause in the fighting and negotiate the release of hostages held in the Gaza Strip. On Tuesday, Hamas officials announced that talks with Israel had not yielded any breakthroughs, despite President Biden's optimism expressed the day before. Bassem Naim, a spokesman for Hamas, stated that the group had not received any new proposals following discussions between senior Israeli officials and mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and the United States in Paris. Ahmad Abdelhadi, another Hamas official, reaffirmed the group's stance, insisting on a long-term ceasefire and dismissing leaked information about the negotiations as attempts to pressure Hamas into compromising. Meanwhile, Qatar, a key mediator, expressed caution about President Biden's timeline for a ceasefire, emphasizing that ongoing efforts were being made but refraining from commenting on specific deadlines. The mounting global pressure for a halt to the violence, particularly as the Muslim holy month of Ramadan approaches and the death toll in Gaza continues to rise, has led to significant concessions from Israel in negotiations. However, Hamas remains steadfast in its demands for a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Despite claims of progress from the State Department, the path to an agreement remains uncertain, with Hamas insisting on its terms for any potential deal. In a related development, an incident involving the interception of a medical convoy in Gaza has further complicated relief efforts. The convoy, which was evacuating patients from a hospital, was stopped by Israeli forces, sparking condemnation from humanitarian organizations and exacerbating tensions on the ground. Amidst these challenges, international efforts to provide aid to Gaza have intensified, with humanitarian organizations resorting to airdrops as a means of delivering essential supplies to affected areas. As the conflict persists and humanitarian needs escalate, the urgency for a resolution grows, highlighting the need for immediate action to alleviate the suffering of civilians caught in the crossfire. Hamas refusing to provide a list of hostages, detailing who is alive and who is deceased. The motive behind Hamas's reluctance remains uncertain. It could be a negotiating tactic or a result of Israel's disruption of Hamas's communication networks. There is speculation that Israel may lack proper communication channels to ascertain the status of hostages held by Hamas. Meanwhile, Benny Gantz, a member of the Israeli War Cabinet, is currently in Washington for meetings with senior U.S. officials, including National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Vice President Sela Harris. Notably, Gantz's presence in Washington is without the approval of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who perceives Gantz as a political rival and prefers to handle negotiations himself. This situation highlights growing impatience within the U.S. administration towards Netanyahu's leadership, viewed as inflexible and hardline. The preference for dialogue with Gantz, seen as a more moderate figure, underscores a shift in diplomatic dynamics. However, these developments suggest a prolonged ceasefire is unlikely, with the Israeli government appearing internally divided. This uncertainty exacerbates the situation on the ground in Gaza City, where humanitarian aid remains insufficient. Residents face dire conditions, with reports of starvation and a lack of basic necessities. The ongoing conflict has forced some to flee in search of sustenance, highlighting the urgent need for a ceasefire and increased humanitarian assistance. Despite international calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities, both sides remain entrenched in their positions. As the violence persists, innocent civilians continue to suffer, further underscoring the urgency of finding a resolution to the conflict.